the other way. There you go. One little button, and I don't know which way is on or off. Well, I know we surprised you with the ending right there. You didn't know that we weren't done yet, but good morning. Happy Mother's Day. My name is Beth. For those of you that don't know me, I am married to Pastor Dan, who is normally up here speaking. But today for Mother's Day, I just felt like God had laid something special on my heart that I wanted to share with you. And part of it pertains to being a mom, but I think some of the things that I've learned being a mom definitely can be used in many other areas of life as well. And really, I just want to share with you the story of sort of a process that God has brought me through. So I am not necessarily an accomplished, polished speaker or author or anything special like that, but I'm just a regular person, and God's taught me some stuff, so I just want to share that with you today. What you saw up here were a group of kids sharing a song, and maybe if you don't know where that song came from, it came from the movie The Greatest Showman. And really the story of that song is a group of people that have been told by society over and over again, basically that they're just not worthy of ... And society's opinion had kept them pushed away and isolated for a really long time. And they decided that, you know what, this is me. I don't care what you have to say. I don't care what you think of me. I'm unique, and the way that I'm put together is good, and so I'm just going to be myself. This is me. And so that's part of what I want to share with you today is just this idea of how often we listen to the opinions and the voices of the culture around us, and we live out or try to live out who we are based on so many other people's opinions. And really, I personally find that very stressful. I don't know about anybody else, but when I look at the things that society or culture maybe says that I need to do as a mom or be as a mom or as a woman or as a wife or just as a person in general, man, it is hard to live up to their standards or in some ways to live down to their standards. So today I just want to share a process that I have walked through. And before we start, I know that we don't necessarily have pens in all the seats, but I know that hopefully you've taken your phone out to check in today. Or just mentally, I would like for you to think of 4 things that describe you. So 4 things that describe you. Whatever that might be. So even for teenagers or young people, there's things that describe you, like maybe you're a soccer player, or maybe you're in middle school, or you're in high school, or there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things about you. So I want you to think for just a minute about 3 or 4 things that describe you, and we're going to use that throughout today. It's normal for us to really try to compare ourselves to the people around us. Like, that's just a normal thing that we do. We see somebody else's house, or we see their car, or we see their kids, and we're like, man, I wish, ... right? We don't watch a lot of, like, regular TV at our house, because normally when the TV is on with adult shows, I'm, like, mentally and emotionally, like, too far gone to pay attention. So we watch a lot of like HGTV, and House Hunters is one of our favorites. I don't know if anybody else in here watches House Hunters or shows like it. But Dan and I sort of sit and laugh sometimes because like the people that walk in and they're married, they don't have kids yet, but they want to start a family someday. So the only option is at least 4 bedrooms, at least 3,000 square feet. And if my, master bathroom is not like a gigantic oasis, then I can't live there. Like, I can't live there. Or this color of granite is like, I would have to redo the whole kitchen. Like, I can't live here. And we're like, those are pretty, really? Like, you can't live there? And in my head, some of the houses, above, 2,000 square feet, the only thing that I'm thinking of is I have to clean all of that. So, like, the kids can share bedrooms because it's hard enough to get one kid to clean their own bedroom. So maybe if they work together, I don't know. But sometimes you look at that and you see these things that people are looking for or that they get. And like inside of you, there's this aspect of like discontentment. I mean, for me, that wells up like, why couldn't we have like a little bit bigger house, or like maybe our master bathroom looks a little nicer, or, you start questioning what you have based on what somebody else is getting, or really what society says this is really the standard, and anything under this, well, I just simply can't live there. And so I don't know for you, but that breeds a lot of discontentment for me. And so there's a verse that God brought into my life that I had memorized a long time ago, but there was a new version of it that really began to change my mindset about listening to the voices and the opinions of the culture around me. And it's this verse. It's Romans chapter 12, verse 2, and maybe you're familiar with it. This is the New Living Translation. It says, "Don't copy the behaviors and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way that you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect." I think for me, sometimes the hardest thing is when I allow the voices of culture and just the life that I've lived to speak into my life and to be the loudest voices and to teach and to train my mind and my brain to think a certain way. So when I say, okay, God, change the way that I think, it's hard. It's a hard thing to do. But it says that when we let God transform us into a new person by changing the way that we think, then we know we'll learn what God's will is for us. And throughout my years being a Christian and being around the church, I think that's one of the biggest questions that people have. What is God's will for my life? What is God's will for my life? Well, I don't know what it is, but this says that if you do these things, you'll learn and you'll know what God's will is for you. So I asked you to write down 3 or 4 things that maybe describe your life a little bit. So I'm going to write down 4 things that I've thought of that kind of describe my life. And this is really little, so I'm going to write them sideways. So 4 things about me. I'm a leader, creative, I'm a wife, and a mom. Those are 4 things that I thought of that sort of describe me. Now, I know that there are seasons of life, and maybe you found yourself in a season where there are certain things about you that are bigger, that are more important, that you spend more time in. So right now, I would say that in my season of my life, this one is definitely more prominent in my life right now. And it doesn't mean that the other things in my life disappear. It doesn't mean that they don't exist. It just means that right now in my life, being a mom is something that I spend a lot more time focusing on. And for those of you that don't know, we have 4 kids, hence why I spend a lot of time being a mom. And I want to talk for just a minute about the voices of culture as a mom that I have experienced that have been something that I've had to try pretty hard to fight against. And maybe you connect with this a little bit. Maybe you've heard this. Maybe you know people that have experienced it. Or maybe this has been something that has just been the way you've thought for a while. So this is what I've experienced. Kid number 1, right? So kid number 1, you tell your family, the world, you're pregnant, the whole world rejoices, and you get enough stuff to fill up a 2-bedroom apartment for kid number 1. There's toys, there's trinkets, there's gadgets. You cannot be a parent without having this because it saved my life. You can't be a parent without having this because it's the best thing that they've ever come out with. And so you get all this stuff with kid number 1. And then kid number 2 comes along, and this was my experience, kid number 2, and they're like, oh, that's nice, they'll have a sibling, and you can use all the stuff you didn't use for kid number 1, for kid number 2, and just get a little extra use out of it. And I don't know about you, but like the pressure of getting all of that stuff, there's stuff that I've still found in the closet with tags on it that like my kid didn't wear, and it's like this sense of guilt, like, oh, someone gave that to me and I didn't use it, and I feel like guilty somehow that I didn't find it at the right time. So then kid number 3 comes along for our family, and just the comments that I experienced out in the world, at the grocery store, wherever I was, oh, wow, that's nice, but definitely very hesitant, like, so this is your last one, right? And well, kind of like, whoa, slow down. Like, what are you doing with 3 kids? And there was actually someone back in Baltimore that creatively nicknamed me Fertile Myrtle because we had 3 kids, right? And I was like, okay, all right. So we had 3 kids, and everybody was like happy, but still like, okay, it's time to take a step back. And there was just this like idea that was vocalized to me over and over and over again that like, okay, we've had enough. And then, surprisingly, kid number 4 came along. And probably the most common question I've had when we said that we had kid number 4 was, you know how that happens, right? Like, you could stop this, right? And I'm like, okay, little grandma in the grocery store, like, we could talk about this happens, but I don't think you're going to want to hear how this happens. Like, why are you asking me this question? Do you really want an answer? But the attitude that was given to me when I shared that, kid number 4, and even now when I walk around with 4 kids, is, wow. Like, and another one is, you must be really busy. Yes, yeah, okay. But really what I've come to understand, like what I have experienced when it comes to, in general, the cultural opinion of kids, and as a mom, is it's nice to have kids, but in general, they're inconvenient and they interrupt the plan for your life. And I've heard more than once from people, well, when you have kids, you just don't get to have fun anymore. And I know that people sort of have that thought, or maybe some of you are like, I would never say that about kids because, you love your kids. But what I'm talking about is sort of the overall cultural idea of what it means to have kids and what it means to have a family. And I found that for me as a mom, I have allowed that to infiltrate my thinking. The kids are an interruption to whatever it was I wanted to do today, because whatever plan I had sometimes gets thrown out the window based on nap time or behavior or whatever. So yeah, they do interrupt things, but is that bad? No more fun? I know that the things that I considered fun before I was married were fun, but we still laugh a lot at our house. I don't know how many of you have had, a kid run down the stairs while life group is there, not left yet, and they're getting ready to get dressed, and they've stripped down to nothing because they need help with their jammies, and they come running through the house while everybody's still there. And, you got to laugh at it. It's funny, right? Like, I think you just have to change what you think about fun. But I do think that as a culture, I want to change the way that I think about kids, because there are some things that are inconvenient, but if I live my life considering my kids to be an inconvenience, then what am I saying to them as they grow up? Being a mom is hard, but also trying to be someone else or compare myself to someone else just makes it worse. So in the verse, Romans 12:2, it says, let God transform you into a new person by changing the way that you think. So my big idea for you this morning is what God thinks is more important than what they think. When I say they, I mean just the culture, the world around us. So sometimes we think, well, what does God think? What does God think about being a mom? What does God think about kids? And I will get to the rest of you that are not moms, I promise. I'm not just going to talk about momhood today. But what does God think? Dan and I were down at a conference this last weekend, and there was a phrase that really struck a chord with me and really hit home, and I've been thinking about it a lot. And the pastor of the church that we were at the conference, his name is Andy Stanley, and this is something that he said. He said, if someone can predict their own death and resurrection and then successfully pull it off, I'll go with whatever they say. If someone can predict their own death and resurrection and then successfully pull it all off, whatever they say, I'll go with that. And that's just really stuck with me. Really, honestly, what does Jesus think? It's way more important than what the people around me might think. So just a couple of ideas. What does Jesus think about kids? This verse is in Psalm 127, verse 3. And it simply says this, up on the screen. It says, children are a gift from the Lord. They are a reward from him. I think sometimes we do have to just sort of transform our minds, especially in the season of life that I am in with my kids. There are days that the gift is not as precious as other days. But I have to be reminded, right, that God gave me these children as a gift, and that's really what he thinks. So I need to make sure that that is what I think. And in the struggles, in the sleepless nights, but Mommy, I just want to sleep with you for a few minutes, night after night, realizing this is what God thinks, and that's what I need to think about with my children. I don't know about you, but there is a lot that the world says about momhood, about womanhood, and there's a chapter in the Bible, Proverbs 31, and maybe some of you have heard of Proverbs 31 or have read Proverbs 31, but it's kind of the mom chapter of the Bible. And I know growing up, it was kind of it was intimidating to read because I was that's a whole list of stuff that I got to do to measure up to the Proverbs 31 woman. But I was chatting with some friends of mine, Alicia and Sally, at a women's event, and we were talking about it, and I actually asked Alicia to rewrite some of the words with just sort of a modern take, sort of if the Proverbs 31 woman lived today, what would be some of the things that she would work through? What does that really look like? So I wanted to read to you some of the things that she wrote out. And again, like I said, sometimes we look at it and it's intimidating and we think that I'll never measure up. I will never be that ... But this is sort of a modern take on it. She gets up early, even though she's exhausted, to find the energy to make food for her family and clean her house. She shops around for the best deals so her family can make ends meet. She shows up for her friends, even when it's inconvenient. She drives to baseball practice, guitar lessons, track meets, and also attends soccer games, dance recitals, swim meets, band concerts. She finds a way to earn a little extra cash for her family. Then, with the money she earns, mostly spends it on those she loves rather than on herself. She walks through anxiety in order to serve others. She walks through depression with endurance and clings to her faith. She packs lunches and folds countless loads of laundry. She balances time at work with quality family time and tries to shoo away the guilt. She prays for those she loves when she sits in rush hour traffic. She volunteers her time and money and doesn't ask for recognition. She gives a compliment to others even when she's feeling insecure about herself. When her husband looks at her, his pulse quickens because he knows how lucky he is to call her his wife. Her children adore her and admire her and appreciate her more than she knows. She gets up despite the pain in her body and drives herself to church. Many women do countless amazing things. You are one of them. more than anything else, as moms today, what I would love is for you to just sort of have this feeling of relief that you're doing a really good job. Even though decisions are hard, situations are hard, trying to do the best that you can might be hard, you're doing a really good job. And more than anything else, God sees who you are and sees what you do, and he's proud of you for that. One difficult thing about a mom, and I'm going to go back to some of the things that I wrote up here, and I think a lot of us can maybe relate to this, and I'm just about finished, but one difficult thing that I found being a mom is sort of this feeling of isolation. And I don't know if any young moms or moms with young kids have felt in somewhat isolated, and I feel maybe not just isolated from society, but what I feel more about being a mom and the idea of isolation is that I feel like the whole world, like this is me, but this is really what the world sees. And so what I feel like sometimes is isolated for me is that when I walk around, like, this is all that I am. And I know some people are like, but isn't that enough? And yes, like there is great joy in being a mom, but there comes a time when you know that there's more to your story than just one isolated thing. And when the whole world just looks at you as just a mom, I found for me that it has made me feel very isolated as a person and just knowing who I am. That nobody knows, like nobody sees any other part of me except the fact that I'm a mom. And I know my kids are really cute, so anywhere I go, people look at my kids more than they look at me, and I don't mean for people to like look at me all the time. But, you know, like being a mom, like that's kind of like when we moved to Connecticut 2.5 years ago, like I walked in and Dan was the pastor and here I am with all the kids. I'm just a mom. And what I think happens is that sometimes when that happens, I feel like this part of me has to be like perfect all the time because that's all that people know. That's all that people see. And I don't know about you, like not everyone in here is a mom. But that's why I asked you to write maybe 3 or 4 things about you, is because I know that each of us probably has like one area of our life that maybe feels like that's all that I am. Like nobody sees any other part of me. And I know even like for teenagers, I know that sometimes for teenagers, it's like the world just sees you as a teenager. Like they don't like, you're incapable of like anything else, well, you're just a teenager. And they don't see anything else. You know, I don't know how many of you knew that Serenity was such a beautiful singer. She's more than just a teenager. She's a very talented young woman, right? So she's more than just a teenager, right? But sometimes we don't see that. And I found that the things that are isolated sometimes grow bigger or overshadow some things. I know that growing up in my hometown, my dad was very popular in high school. His family is huge, and everybody knows, you know, the Ellis family. And I remember when I was like in middle school and high school walking around town, and there were people that would come up to me all the time, "Oh, you're Bruce's daughter, right?" And I'm like, "Yes, and I do have a name." You know, I love my dad. He's a fantastic person, and I love being associated with him because he's amazing. So it had nothing to do with that association, but after a little while, it was like, yes, I am Bruce's daughter, but there's more to me than that. And I found that really the struggle for me was the struggle to be known. And there's freedom when you feel comfortable around people that know everything about you. There's just like this rest and this peace that you feel like you can be fully yourself. Well, I know that in society, it's not always easy to do that. There's not every group of people doesn't know everything about you. So in my process that God's brought me through thinking about this over the last couple of months, This is where God's brought me. And I don't know if you remember my big idea, what God thinks is more important than what the world around me thinks, or what feels isolated or what doesn't feel isolated, or how well people know me. There's some verses that I just want to read for you to listen to. In Psalm 139, it says, "O Lord, you have examined my heart. You know everything about me. You know when I sit down or stand up. You know my thoughts, even from far away. You see me when I travel and when I rest at home. You know everything I do. You know what is going on or what I'm going to say, even before I say it. You go before me and you follow me. You place your hand of blessing on my head." There was just sort of a moment when I felt like God laid that on my heart. And it was that moment of like all this stuff that the world, the viewpoint that I feel, or the opinion I feel like the world has of me, God was like, "It's all right. I know everything there is to know about you. And I love you just the way you are." Just like the verse that the kids sang before. "In the sharpest words, I'm going to drown them out. This is me." And when it comes right down to it, the next verses in Psalm 139 will be up on the screen, starting in verse 16. It says, "You saw me before I was born. Every day of my life was recorded in your book. Every moment was laid out before a single day had passed. How precious are your thoughts about me, O God. They cannot be numbered." Before we were even born, before like our parents ever knew anything about us, God knew the details. He knew every little piece of what our life was going to be like. And he looked at us and said, "I know you and I love you just the way you are." And for me, in this season of feeling like mom is hard, feeling like there's a lot of other stuff that hasn't been able to happen, whatever, knowing that before I was ever even born, God put me together and he said, "I see all of your days and I know you and I love what I see." There's a song that we sang numerous times down at the conference, and I just want to read some of the words to you because it really stuck with me. It says, "Speak to me when the silence steals my voice, because you understand me. Come to me in the valley of unknowns. You understand me, God. So I throw all my cares before you. My doubts and fears don't scare you, because you're bigger than I thought you were. You're bigger than I thought. So I stop all negotiations with the God of all creation, because you're bigger than I thought you were. You're bigger than I thought you were." There comes this time we just realize that God's bigger, and he knows me, and he understands me, so I can be confident in that. And there's a freedom that comes in knowing who you are and living in the fullness of who you are. Really going into the big idea once again, what God thinks is more important than what the world thinks. And really my goal for you today is just sharing a process that God has taken me through. And maybe there's something in your life that you've experienced recently that you feel like people don't understand, people don't know. Maybe they only see you as just one thing about you, and they just focus on that, and it just seems like they don't know who you are. I think sometimes everyone goes through a season. Maybe some of you are retired, and like that's the only thing. Nobody sees anything else about you but, well, I'm retired, and that's it. All of us are in different seasons of our life. But what my prayer would be for you is that knowing that the God of the universe is proud of you, and his viewpoint and opinion is unchanging, no matter what happens. He loves you, and he created you just the way you are. Something to think about for this week is spend time asking God to help you see and know who you are. Ask him to show you how to look at others as whole people and not just one isolated part. And then allow God to transform us by changing the way that we think, because it's a powerful thing. Will you pray with me? God, I thank you for today. I thank you that we can come and we can celebrate the fact that, you made moms. You made that a job. You gave that a special position. And for those in here that are moms or we all have a mom, I pray that we would know how to honor her today in a special way. And God, that we would see that we are whole people to you, that you understand all the details of our lives. And there's nothing that you don't know, there's nothing that you don't see, but that you love and you care for each of us just the way you are, the way that we are. And Lord, I pray that the moms that are in here today, or just each of us, that we would be able to put off the stress of trying to live up to the ever-changing opinion of the world around us, that we would look to you and we would walk out in confident, being rooted and established in the fact that you love us more than anything else. I do thank you for this time, and I ask that you would bless it in Jesus' name. Amen.